It's time for Black and White, a show that wants to bring all of us together, talking again about the issues that concern us. It's time to hear from people who only want to deal with facts. It's time for you to re-engage in your right of American free speech. It's time for Black and White. Welcome back to Black and White, and we're talking to Wayne Black. No relation, just as happens to be his last name. He's an author who's written a book, which you're going to hold up the book for us there, sir. And School in Security. Clever name. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
I asked Wayne before the show, why did he decide to write this book? And tell us, before you answer that question, tell us a little bit about your background.
Miami-Dade police detective. Here I worked in the state attorney's office in Miami during right after 9/11. I ran was on a red team for Homeland Security. That's a team that tries to do assessments and try to break into certain facilities. That's a red team concept. After that, after the Bush administration, I protected Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld for the decade until his death. And when I wasn't traveling with the secretary, I was doing assessments at schools all over the country. So we'd do life safety assessments and make reports to schools on what they should do. And that's what I'm doing today. I decided to write the book because we've had too many school shootings. Parents are more and more being kept out of schools. We saw what happened in Loudoun County, Virginia. So this book is a guidebook for parents and grandparents and some educators who want to own security. It's going to tell them what questions to ask of the school board and how to hold them responsible for the safety of their children. Really simply, we can protect the President of the United States, we can protect sporting events, but we're not protecting all the schools like we should. And our kids are just as important as the President of the United States.
I totally agree. Thank you for that. I'm not trying to put you on the spot per se, sir. I just want to get your perspective. We had a couple of school shootings recently, different of night and day. We had the Texas school where we had 30 or 40 police officers waiting in a hallway as children were being shot, and nobody wanted to crash the door to go after the shooter. And then we had Nashville, where in a matter of moments, they broke in the door and dispatched the person who was shooting children. As a police officer, law enforcement officer, what do you think happened in Texas?
Well, there's a concept, fight, flight, or freeze, and they froze, and that's largely because of muscle memory and lack of training. Look, it's scary to run into gunfire. I've done it, and I tell officers, look, if you're not going to do it, you ought to sell car insurance or teach school or do something. But when you put that badge on, that's your job to do that. A noted psychologist, Dr. Hartley Stock, told me, because I called him right after that. I wrote an article for the Federalist about the failures of Uvalde, and he told me that probably after the first 5 or 6 people didn't engage, the first 5 or 6 officers, their concept called groupthink, the others may have been neurologically incapable of engaging. And remember, it was the BORTAC officer who came from the barbershop after 40 some minutes and finally went right in and engaged. So that was just, everything about that was terrible, especially after the lessons we learned from Columbine and then from Parkland. Unfortunately, and we don't know this for sure, but we think that delay in Parkland and in Uvalde and even in Columbine, a lot of kids bled to death that would have survived that story. Now, back to the one in Tennessee, that was, the police acted quickly. We have a saying, when seconds count, the police are only minutes away. So as I look at that, if they would have put ballistic window tint on the window of the school, the trans shooter would not have been able to shoot through and come in and kill people. That's one idea. The other thing, if they had an SRO, an armed school resource officer out there, that probably wouldn't have happened because they would have engaged it. Now, remember, the trans shooter apparently went to other places and then that were harder targets and then chose the school. The video is chilling of the shooter driving by that playground full of kids that were out in the open and then going to attack the school.
I have 2 follow-up questions to what you said. First of all, and you may not feel comfortable, or may feel very comfortable with all the experience you had. What's changed in our society that our children are so much at risk?
Well, a couple things. I feel comfortable talking about it. I talk about it in the book. It's going to happen again. So I can tell you that there's 100% chance that there's going to be more school violence. My goal is to try to limit that as much as possible with the help of parents and grandparents and teachers. What's changed? Video games, just really nasty video games that make it popular to shoot and kill a bunch of people. Schools that don't have a plan to identify display behavior, stressors, and things like that. All these shooters have red flags. They give us red flags at some level. They tell us they're coming, and we miss it or ignore it or whatever happens. So that's changed. The other thing is the media publishes the name of the shooters. We should never do that. So we make little rock stars out of these shooters, and so the kids that are on the fence, they've been bullied or whatever it is, that they're thinking about being a shooter. They watch TV and they go, wow, if I did that, then my name and my picture would be all over the news. So that's a media problem, I think, that we need to deal with. We need to post the pictures of the families of the victims and the victims, not the shooters. We should never even talk about them.
Second question, part one, if I could. Whenever there's a shooting, certain political parties want to ban guns. I listened to that for decades. If you follow the logic of what they're saying, that they want to create new laws to restrict the ownership of weapons by good people. The people who want to go out and kill people can find a weapon. They can either steal it or they can buy it on the street or whatever. So that the laws that restrict the legal purchase of weapons does nothing to restrict the purchase weapons off the street. I think I remember reading recently that 95% of the killings in Chicago were which has some of the most strict gun laws in the country, were never registered, and that they were bought off the street, many of them coming from Mexico. So how do you feel about all this talk about gun control?
Well, look, it didn't work in Cambodia. It didn't work in some parts of Asia, did it? It didn't work with the communists. They took the guns and they still put people on trains. That'll never happen in the United States, I hope. The only thing that's going to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. That's really simple. It's as simple as that. So it's a waste of time. But you're right. It's political. Every weekend in Chicago and St. Louis and Los Angeles in gun-free zones, there's a mass casualty incident, and it's not reported on very much. But you look at the stats: 20 people shot, 30 people shot in Chicago, 15 dead every single weekend. It's a gun-free zone. So
Right.
Taking away guns doesn't work. There's only the law-abiding citizens would turn them in.
And part two of that question is, do you think that and I wish I could come up with a better word, but the word I want to use at the moment is the psyche. Is the psyche of the police force adversely affected by all this talk about an actual defunding of the police?
Of course it has been. I mean, I talk to our brothers and sisters who are still in law enforcement, and of course, and we're lucky to be in Florida. In Florida and Texas, for example, the governors support the police. And there's actually a signing bonus in Florida for police officers from other jurisdictions, Chicago, New York, LA, to come here and sign up and be a police officer here, where Florida supports law enforcement. But look at the riots a couple years ago and the whole defunding thing. That didn't work. I don't know if you've been to some of those cities, but it's worse than a third world country in some of those places. Seattle, Portland, some parts of Los Angeles, Oakland. It's a no-go zone for law-abiding citizens. It just doesn't work. So yes, police morale is in the toilet in those areas because of this. And cops are saying, look, I've got 5 more years maybe to retire, and I want to get this pension, and I'm just going to hang out. But I'm not going to do anything really other than what I have to, because if I do something and it's the least bit controversial, the press will be on me, my family will be all stressed out, and I might get charged with something by some of these overzealous George Soros prosecutors.
So it's really so there is some pushback. I noticed in 2020 in some of the cities where they were having these horrible riots, you could see the police standing around, and we later found out that the mayor told the chief of police for the police to stand down, let them riot.
Right. Look in Minnesota, they gave them the police station by order of the mayor. They turned it over. What we're not seeing, the untold story, is at the breakfast table, law enforcement officers talking to their spouse, either a female or a male police officer, and the spouse says, "Are you sure you really want to do this? Are you going to come home? Are you going to get charged? Is it really worth it?" So a lot of people are leaving law enforcement because of that, and I don't blame them. I could never be a police officer in this environment out west today.
There was a story recently. There are 45,000 open police jobs in this country.
And the crime in the street shows that, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it does take a rocket scientist, but I don't believe it takes a rocket scientist if you decrease the number of policemen and the police force to control crime. Crime's going to go up. It's perfectly logical that were to happen. Yet, and we have prosecutors who have been supported by George Soros who have taken away bail, reduced charges from felonies to misdemeanors.
Well, it's a perfect storm, like you say. You've got prosecutors who would have the no bail thing. They don't want to prosecute people. You've got members of Congress like AOC that say, well, these people are just stealing purses, like in the recent one with Nordstrom's. They're stealing purses so they can feed their family. No, they're not. And so you see that, and then with the police morale and everything, they arrest somebody, and before the officer's shift is over, the bad guys back out. It's the perfect storm for criminals now in some of these big cities because of the lack of prosecution.
I saw a story. We're going to have to take a break here in just a moment, but I saw a story recently that they estimated about 2,400 people are responsible for a great percentage of the crime that takes place in New York City. They've been arrested 30, 40, 50 times, but they get released.
Without a cause and effect situation, meaning if you commit a crime, we're going to arrest you and you're going to go to jail. If you don't have that, there's no deterrent. It's going to continue, and the law-abiding citizens aren't going to be safe. It's really simple.
So Wayne, hold up the book so we can see it, see the cover.
It's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Books A Million, or on my website, wayneblack.com.
We'll be right back to continue our discussion with Wayne Black. We are Americans, male and female, from many races and cultures from all over the world. One thing above all else is we are patriots who protect our nation and defend, when necessary, our Constitution from attacks both foreign and domestic. Today, as American patriots, we must take back our country from those who want to destroy it and us. We must start by taking back our children and their education. Parents, not union, should be in charge of our children's education. We must be sure that they are taught about the greatness of America and its people. Our children should not be indoctrinated with the belief that parents are racist and are evil and trying to destroy the world. As patriots, we must take back our country from foreign nations who want to destroy us and our way of life. Yes, as patriots, we want America to be first. We want an open and fair trade policy, energy independence, safe cities, and secure borders where we can grow and prosper as a nation of free people. Become an American patriot. Help take back America by voting Republican. Welcome back to Black and White. We're talking with Wayne Black, who has a new book out. Let's show them the cover, sir. And where can we get it?
On Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Books A Million, or on my website, wayneblack.com. I'm happy to announce that it's an Amazon bestseller already. It's just been out for a few weeks, and I think it'll work. It's a guidebook for parents and grandparents and educators that will help them tighten the schools and help them hold school boards and superintendents accountable. My actual assessment tool, the checklist, is in the book. So they can take this book to the school board meeting and stand up. Hopefully they're not in a jurisdiction where they'll get arrested like that poor gentleman did when his daughter was raped. They can take the book and ask the questions and ask, for example, who's in charge of security by name? not some amorphous committee. Not, well, it might be that guy or it might be this guy, who by name, and then ask those questions. What are you doing to protect my child? Do the police, for example, have a key to the school? Or do you invite the police to train in the school after hours so they know the whole layout? Do they have an engineering drawing of the school? Do you have a choke point? Do you have one way in, one way out of the school? And is that monitored? That's called a locked door. It's really simple. We lock our homes. We need to lock those school doors. So in case of an emergency, a police chase ends up near the school, they're looking for a fugitive, or God forbid, an active threat or an active shooter, mitigation is important. So it's good to lock those doors and be prepared. But it's all about planning. A person snatcher has a plan. They've got a 10-second plan. They're going to grab the person, run down the street. Bank robber might have a 2-month plan, how he's going to do it. A terrorist might have a 10-year plan. If our plan at our schools is better than the bad guy, we win. If it's not better, we lose. And I always say if it's predictable, it's preventable. So I predict in the book, I guarantee you that we're going to have more school shootings in this country this year, next year. We need to limit that exposure as much as we can.
So tell us what else is in the book.
We look at Columbine, Sandy Hook, Parkland, Uvalde. We sort of diagnose that, analyze it in the granular form. Got an interview with a Parkland mother who lost her lovely daughter, Alyssa, and that's where Alyssa's Law came from. That's chilling. That's a chilling interview. Every parent should read that. You can't imagine what parents go through. And so hopefully this is a call to arms to get parents to get up, stand up, and ask the school what happens. And if the school's not going to do it, I recommend you put your kids in a private school or homeschool them if possible, or go to a state where there's school choice, where the money follows like in Florida, where the money follows the student to the school that the parents choose. And that's really the way it should be.
In the first segment, we were talking about gun laws and gun ownership, the cry to get rid of guns after time there's a school shooting. We don't seem to see demands for gun laws in Chicago after a bloody massacre each weekend in the city, because they've already got the toughest laws some of the toughest laws in the country. But my question is there in your mind a turning point, a specific thing that happened that made our children more at risk than they were before?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things. We talked about perfect storms during the riots and things like that. I think that part of the problem is that we have what I call normalcy bias, and that's a form of denial. We think, meaning schools, think that it won't happen here. That, oh, you know what, we haven't had an incident at our school, so we must be doing something right. That's called a false positive. It's always the other school down the road or this school or that school. But look, history has taught us it doesn't matter the size of the school. It can be a giant school like Columbine or Parkland, or it can be a small school like the one in Tennessee. It can be a religious school. It could be a synagogue or a church. We see that all the time. The bottom line is we're not prepared. And why aren't we? Either politically, we don't want to admit it. That's an elected school board, or our psychic doesn't allow us to think like the enemy. And look, we've had failures of imagination. We didn't imagine Pearl Harbor. We didn't imagine 9/11, the USS Cole, Columbine, all those horrific things that happened. If we can't imagine it, then we can't prepare for it. So the purpose of the book is to get people cranked up to take a stand and protect their children.
We're speaking with Wayne Black, security expert. Let me ask you a question. You mentioned a moment ago about Columbine and Uvalde and other places, Sandy Hook. As you looked at each of these shootings and perhaps even more, is there any commonality between all of these?
There is. If it's a student, disaffected student, stressors, difference in display behavior. They look different, they smell different, they dress differently. They tell their friends, I'm going to be a school shooter sometimes. That's what happened in Parkland. That guy was killing animals in the backyard, and people were reporting it, but nobody did anything because people don't want to stand up. Apparently, they didn't want to stand up, and there was an issue with the superintendent in Parkland too. He wanted to suppress crime statistics in the school.
I mean, I'm sorry for interrupting you, but I need to ask this question. You just used the word when we were talking about what was happening in these schools. Nobody. What do you mean when you say nobody? Who is nobody?
What I mean is somebody has to stand up and somebody has to say, wait a minute, I'm in charge. But it's not that popular. So what the book does, it has the parents ask who really owns it, who's in charge, and what's the security budget. For example, I was at a school and they said, well, you know, we only have $30,000 this year to put for cameras. And I said, well, have you applied for a grant? In the book, it tells them how to apply for grants for security related things. And oh, by the way, you only have $30,000 for security. How much money do you all spend to go to that teachers conference in Las Vegas every year on hotels, meals, liquor, and everything else? What's more important? And by the way, what is the value? You all tell me. You would be addressing the school board or a principal or a superintendent. Tell me what is the dollar value of a child's life? Put a price on that. And then don't tell me about budget. And a lot of things don't cost. A lot of planning, for example, doesn't cost a thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how many schools have Narcan available? It's over the counter. It'll handle the fentanyl overdose. How many schools do that? I guess from what I see, maybe 5% of the country.
Amazing, amazing. So you said on more than one occasion in this show that it's inevitable we're going to have another shooting. Do you have a sense that not what specific building, but is it a specific area of the country, or it could happen anywhere?
Well, it does happen anywhere. We've seen that in the past. Large schools, small ones. It can happen anywhere. And it will happen. Look, down here in Florida a couple days ago, a student brought a loaded pistol to school on the first day of school. I think it was a Cooper City High School. And of course, on the PR side, the school and the superintendent says, well, we somebody reported it. We took the gun from her. She got arrested, and no one was in danger. Of course, they were in danger. She had a loaded gun in the school. Everybody around her was in danger, and then she's lucky that, or they're lucky that she didn't reach in her purse and even accidentally shoot the gun. So we've got to get over this PR thing. We've got to stand up, and parents have to do it. Schools may not want to do it. Parents have to make them do it. Stand up and say, what are you doing to protect my child?
Write a lot of commentary, and I have a significant business background, registered investment advisor, managing money for almost 50 years. And I look at what happened in our country. And one of the things that I think is a turning point in our country was when the soldiers came home after World War II. Mom went to work to provide for the family. And when dad came back and got a job, mom didn't necessarily quit her job. And they found themselves in a situation where they had more money. They could buy a house in the suburbs, maybe a second car, take vacations. And they didn't have necessarily a lot of time to spend in supervision of their children. So what happened, we turned over the training and the education responsibility of our children to the classroom teachers. And as they gain more and more power over the decades, we find ourselves in a situation today where that we have students that are failing in math and science and history in our public school system, yet we have teachers that are spending enormous amounts of time talking about non-educational issues. When we turned over the responsibility of raising our children some point in time after World War II, I think that that's when the education environment, because parents, I don't think today know what to do. They may realize that there's a problem and they hope it's not involving their children, but yes, there's a problem, but perhaps your book may be a guidebook to help them educate themselves about the problems and about what they need to do.
I sure hope so. Look, parents need to know. You know, we see on television all these crazy things that parents are not to know about, let's say a gender re-identification or even a proposal for a sex change. Their school The schools think they can do it. We see that recent litigation. That sometimes I think, am I in the twilight zone? Even the president said the other day, these are our kids. No, they're not your kids. They're our kids. They're the parents' kids. And so parents need to stand up and stop that stuff. And if a child comes home with indoctrination books in the 3rd grade about what gender they want to be, parents need to raise hell because everything about that is wrong. 10 years ago, we would have charged that teacher with child abuse, but not now. So it's just insane what's going on in some parts of the country at schools.
So we
Again,
we have about a minute left. I want to just ask one more question on that subject matter. So the book will help them understand the issues and what they need to do to begin to take control of the situation for their children.
Absolutely. So if parents can park their car, here's an idea. Park your car near the school and see if you can walk in. I do that at every assessment. I park the car, I walk in, and if I don't go to the office for our scheduled meetings, I walk in the front of the school, and if I can go sit in a classroom, that's a huge problem. Because if you can do it as a parent and I can do it, a bad guy can do it. You should never be able to walk off the street into a school when students are present.
We've been having a fascinating and helpful discussion on child safety in schools with Wayne Black. One more time, title of the book and where can they get it?
It's called School Insecurity, and it's Barnes & Noble, Amazon online. There's even a Kindle version, or Books A Million, or on my website, wayneblack.com.
Thank you, sir, for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you.
You're welcome. And we'll be right back after these messages. Inflation for most people is causing them to use their credit cards to try and make up for income shortfalls. How big is this problem? In the second quarter of 2022, Americans added $46 billion to their credit card balances. Some of that could be you. The Federal Reserve Consumer Credit Report showed that the rate of interest on credit cards went from 14.56 to 16.65%. Those Americans struggling with credit card debt saw their delinquency rates escalate from 1.66% to 1.81%. The Cambridge Debt Consolidation Program may be able to help you reduce the interest rates by 2/3 and cut your time to pay off the debt from 30 years to as little as 5 years. If you're struggling and you want professional and objective help getting your credit house in order, then call 1-855-435-2066 or go to Thank you for joining us today, and we'd like to hear your comments or questions. So go to bwradionetwork.com. That's bwradionetwork.com and give us your questions or comments. And thanks for joining us today.